As you probably know by now, Terraria is a game of bosses. They're the main stepping stones of progression, and they're massively important. Obviously, they all have their own difficulty and pieces of the game that they lead to, but what about the loot itself? What bosses have the best loot, and which ones have the worst? So that's my goal today. I'm going to rank all 18 Terraria bosses in order of how good the loot is that they directly drop, and that's it. So for example, Wall of Flesh, I'm counting specifically the drops themselves like the Breaker Blade, but the unlocking of hard mode and a separate new wave of content will not count towards the drops. So only the stuff that you can get in the treasure bag, pretty much. A couple of things I want to get out of the way. I will be including expert and master mode drops, especially when they matter to the ranking. Also, mini bosses and all that won't be included, so no Old One's Army, no Pumpkin Moon, nothing. Alright, without further ado, number 18. The first boss and the worst boss for drops, it's gonna be Skeletron. This guy's real reward is the dungeon, of course, but the treasure bag... Let's be honest here, I probably care more about reading this than the Skeletron bag. There's a few drops, but they all just don't have much going for them. The Book of Skulls is immediately outclassed, especially by the dungeon loot that you get immediately after. The hook is decent, but at most it's the teeny tiniest bit better than any other good hook you can get at the time. Then finally, the Bone Glove. It's just not really worth an accessory slot. And look at that, we're out of drops. That's it. That's it, yeah. Number 17 then is going to be a weird one. We have Moonlord. Hear me out. Most of this ranking is progression based, and when the boss loot is after progression is over, there's just nothing to mention. All the loot is useless for progression. I put him above Skeletron because of purely numbers. This guy's got a million, billion, zillion drops, and also the cool/fun factor of the drops moves him up a bit. Number 16 is the King Slime. This guy's drops are really great. The only problem is that I'm lying. But seriously though, he's just super underwhelming. The slime hook is fine, but that has the same argument as Skeletron. Ninja armor is easily overshadowed, and the slimy saddle can fairly quickly be replaced by a pogo stick from the party girl. The only other drop here that really sparks a ton of interest would be the Royal Gel, which just so happens to be super situational, and like the Bone Glove, it just isn't worth the accessory slot. So yeah, King Slime, you suck. But what doesn't suck is you guys for subscribing. And if you're not subscribed, I'm trying to hit the big 10K soon, so if you enjoyed, press the button. Alright, next boss, number 15, Lunatic Cultist. In terms of drops from this guy, the only thing that isn't cosmetic is the Ancient Manipulator, which you can't even use right away. No expert item, no nothing. Ancient Manipulator is good, however. It can craft up all the lovely pillar weapons, but since there is literally one drop that matters, bro is getting a low score. Sorry, bro. For number 14, I have to put Deerclops. This is one of those bosses that just kind of exists. There's a solid loot pool with a handful of decent stuff, but nothing exceptional. Stuff like Lucy and Chester can last you a while, but they both have clear alternatives that are way easier to get. The Bone Helm, which is the expert mode accessory, isn't bad at all, as some nice extra damage, but it's kind of just a slightly better Bone Glove with the same issue. Number 13 though is Queen Bee. Sorry madam, but your drops just can't keep up with the rest. I will say though, this is when we're getting to that point where no more bosses are bad whatsoever. So while Queen Bee does have some decent drops, they just don't hold up quite as well. The Summoner Gear, Bee's Knees, and the Honeycomb stick out as the better drops here. And for the rest, there's better magic options, there's better melee options, Bee-Nades got nerfed, and I recently found out that the Hive Pack was fooling us all along. So yeah. I didn't expect to put the Queen Bee so low, but here she is. On to number 12, bouncing our way all the way from the Hallow. Please welcome the Queen Slime. Okay, now stop cheering. Let's lock in. The Queen Slime has some great drops. The only thing here is that there's just not a lot of drops in the first place. Crystal Assassin armor is very usable, despite being one of the most despite being one of the most armor saturated points of the game. The Blade Staff is actually really good, and it's the main reason the Queen Slime made it up this high. Genuinely great weapon. The mount is also pretty good. It's the King Slime one, but with wings built into it. Can't really go wrong. And lastly, the Expert Mode accessory. This one fits into the same category of damaging accessories, which are generally not amazing. But this one nicely fills up any early hard mode accessory gaps, so I'll hold it a bit higher. Then for number 11, 0.5. Look, I had to throw in Betsy. She literally has everything any other boss has, other than an expert mode drop, which the cultist doesn't have either. So yeah, Betsy is pretty much a boss, and this is where I'm putting her. Good loot. For the actual number 11, I went with Plantera. Obviously they're both in the jungle, but I think Plantera and Queen Bee are really similar because of their weapon drops. Plantera is a very weapon-heavy boss, like the Queen Bee. Just Plantera is heavier. There's some good weapons here, especially the Seedler, and Plantera has a whole bunch of extra non-weapon items that are pretty useful. The axe is a fantastic hammer option, funny how that works. The Thorn Hook is great with its pulling speed, and the Tempo Key is good for the anti-hoikers. Last thing, the Spore Sack, once again, is another damaging accessory that just isn't all that worth it. Number 10 is Golem. Beetle Armor, Sunstone, Eye of the Golem, Shiny Stone, Pixaw, a pretty hefty pool of weapons, and a really, really awesome mask. Just kidding. But anyways, Golem feels a lot like Plantera with the size of loot pool, and honestly, you just can't go wrong. I just think the accessories are much better, and Golem has the bonus of Beetle Armor on top, the best melee armor before the post-game. Not a whole lot more to say here, kinda just better Plantera, I guess. For number 9, I've got the Empress of Light. This is when I got to the point where I kind of realized that Terraria boss drops are just goated across the board, and from here they're really hard to put in a solid concrete order. Besides that, I gotta do something, so Empress is going right here. Like I mentioned, all of the loot from here on is really great. All of the weapons from Empress are very good, especially for summoners. Her wings are a really great option, and she's got the soaring insignia for infinite flight. Just an amazing loot pool with not really much else to say. Then number 8, Duke Fishron. Honestly, just Empress loot, but fishy. Seriously though, Duke does bows and melee better. His magic weapons are great, he's got another great set of wings, and the summon, well, yeah, that's just worse than Empress. Anyway, the two bosses are very comparable, and the main reason I put Duke higher is because you can literally fight him as the first boss in hard mode. Obviously that's not the intended point, but anything's possible. So, yeah. The big number 7 is the big Eater of Worlds. This dude has some really good progression-based drops, which is why he's so high. So yeah, shadow scales are super important to moving forward, like how you can make a nice new set of armor. The Nightmare Pickaxe leads to Molten Gear, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, but it's a good one. On top of that, you got Obsidian Armor for the cooler side of summoners. And of course, the most foolproof accessory, the Worm Scarf. Also, you really can't go wrong with a nice batch of extra Demonite for some money. Yeah. Number 6, the Brain of Cthulhu. So take literally everything I just said about the Eater of Worlds and apply that here. Same stuff, but Crimtane is usually better than Demonite. Tissue samples do the same thing as Shadow Scales, but with the addition of an extra weapon. Also, Brain of Confusion is better than the Worm Scarf. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, boss number 5. It's the Eye of Cthulhu. Alright. I'm gonna need you all to hear me out. Shield of Cthulhu. And if I hear a single one of you say something about,
you literally can't even base it off of one item. Plus, you can only get it in expert mode.
It's 2025, and you're still playing Classic?
But I...
Anyways, all the other Eye of Cthulhu drops are relatively mediocre, especially since you can mine Demonite and Crimtane with a gold pickaxe. Before we move on to further plead my case for the Shield of Cthulhu, this thing gives great boss movement, immunity frame dashes, exploration movement, instant momentum on mounts and Hermes boots, and the list goes on. Speaking of the list going on, number 4, Wall of Flesh. If I didn't make it clear, I really like the Shield of Cthulhu, but I will say, for the sake of toning down my bias, the Demon Heart pretty simply is the best expert mode drop, period. The whole extra accessory slot is amazing, and no matter how much you hate dashing or love balloons, this bad boy will help. So yeah, in addition to the best expert drop, the wall hands out some really nice early hard mode weapons for each class. These do a great job of helping to transition your loadout at such a massive power increase. Last thing worth mentioning are the equipables, mostly the emblems, which give a bunch of value and craft into more stuff, but also the master mode mount, which is great for speed. Alright, and before I run my way into the top 3, I think you probably know what they are, and if you somehow can't think of it just yet, let me play NPC Hit 4 a bunch of times. Okay, yeah, it's the mech bosses, all 3 of them. The reason that they're all going up here together is because the most important bits are shared among all 3. Hallowed bars, the expert drops, and a handful of the soul recipes require either any one or all 3 of these guys. Hallowed bars can make you a fantastic armor set for all 4 classes, a nice chunk of weapons across the board, access to the pumpkin moon a little later on, and the pickaxe axe. Oh, and This guy, but he kind of smells bad. On top of all that, combining all 3 of the mech boss souls can get you the Avenger's Emblem and the True Knight's Edge, on top of being part of the pickaxe and drill recipes too. Whew. So what order are these bosses going in? Because what we've deduced is that only the individual uses of each soul will decide their fate. So number 3, I'm going with the twins. This is definitely some bias shining through, because you can definitely make the argument that Souls of Sight aren't the worst with the combo of the Optic Staff, Rainbow Rod, Magic Harp, and the Fairy Bell. But hey, Mega Shark is like really awesome, and I'm the #1 boomerang glazer of all time, which is why Destroyer is going number 2. I've kind of already said what there is to be said about this guy, so enjoy a short commercial break, I guess. Hopefully you had an ad blocker. Okay, so finally, last but obviously not least, Skeletron Prime has Souls of Fright, which can be crafted into a flamethrower, which is pretty good, but more importantly, the Naughty Present, which pretty much wipes the floor with any other soul crafted item. This thing gives you access to the whole Frost Moon catalog, which is like, really good. So, yeah, Skeletron Prime, kind of the GOAT. Alright. That seems like just about all that needs to be said about Terraria's boss drops and which ones are better than which. Thanks again to all the members, and like the video so YouTube will love me. Thank you, bye bye, have a good day.